Welcome to the Creative Tools Podcast. My name is Ashay, and I'm immensely passionate about using technology for creativity. On this podcast, I talk to various creators about what tools and technology they use to be creative. My guest today is Joe Fenton. Joe is a founder and creative director of Swiga, a company that makes murals. He focuses on implementing visually inspiring and meaningful projects in the areas of art, branding, and graphics for physical environments. He specializes in art direction, concept design, and creative execution for large scale visuals. His personal mission is to create joy, inspiration, and meaning for meaningful people. Hey, Joe, thanks a lot for visiting my podcast.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning to you too. So let me jump right in. My first question is, what do you create?
So I create art, wall art, and I've been working on a pretty big body of work that's actually showing right now at the Idea Fab Lab in the Wrigley building down in Santa Cruz. We just had a big show this weekend, and then I have a company called Swega, and we do like large it's environmental graphics is like the term of what we do, which entails like large wall graphics and murals and like kind of custom art installations and curating art and bringing in other artists. And so within that, I also create my own art for clients. And so yeah, pretty much just art.
And has your creations always been physical, or you also create some digital art pieces as well?
No, I mean, I think in this day and age, like it's you can't really avoid being, using technology and certain components of your art and your process being digital. I wouldn't really call myself like a digital artist, so to speak. I've been playing a little bit with some of the AI tools and kind
Hmm,
of seeing what that's all about. And the big boom the last couple of years is everyone talking about like these NFTs and all this stuff. And
yeah.
like honestly, like and I've kind of checked that out, explored it and dabbled in it. And I think a lot of it is just hype and nonsense. And I think that art um, is an easy vehicle to use to explore some of these new technologies, because art it's whatever. Like, can you sell a digital graphic for $60 million, or can you, like, it's kind of always been a thing that it's cultural and it's relative, and there's no inherent like value. It's all perception and perspective. And so yeah, I mean, I definitely make digital art. Some of the digital pieces, I'll do prints directly from them, because they're, it's art. And then I can do reproductions and prints. So yeah.
Great. So I want to section this interview into three parts. I want to talk about the pre-creation aspect of it. So before you start creating, what happens, then the creation part, and then the post-creation. So after you have created, what do you do? So
Sure.
let's focus first on the pre-creation aspect. So do you use any tools and technology to record and retrieve the inspirations that you get for your creations?
Yeah, I like, I do still have a lot of paper sketchbooks, laying around. And I'll write notes and still go to like a paper sketchbook. But then I also like I've been using the iPad a lot more, so I use Procreate and Draw. And but that's kind of going into the beginning of the creation
Hmm.
process. And I think, like, more for the client work or as needed for personal work, like there's a research element that is done online, like just looking up imagery and researching subjects and getting on Wikipedia and reading about stuff. And so yeah, that's kind of the pre-creation process. I'll still do sketching on paper, but then I'll start sketching in Procreate, or take like a paper sketch and bring it into the iPad, and then kind of trace over it or reference the sketch to start the drawing.
Uh, but how do you, well, let me ask you this question. How do you store this information? Like, for example, the paper sketch, I understand it is stored in a notebook, or if you bring the paper sketch in Procreate, then it is stored in Procreate. But
Yeah.
then your notes, or do you tag it so that you can find it later when you are creating your creation?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, I definitely explored like some of the different softwares out there, like what, like Evernote, or
Hmm.
what's the there's some of those like that. But honestly, I've just found that I just organize files, and I mostly use Mac computer. I don't
Hmm.
like I'm not really too into PC. I'll only use that like in terms of, like, usually, like, I use a laser cutter for producing art, and I have like a PC machine that runs that. But I pretty much just use Macs, and just use Finder and organize file folders, and kind of keep things organized. For clients, it would be by job numbers, and then I kind of use that same kind of information structure for personal art, like folder structures, and then just using like cloud storage, to be able to work across different machines, like from
Hmm.
iPad to computer to other machines, and just using cloud storage. And but yeah, I think some of those tools I've for storing and tagging, and I've just found, like, for me, it's just kind of extra fluff that doesn't really add. Like, I just use my brain and the files, and like that's it.
Okay. So has it ever happened to you that you recorded something as your inspiration, but when you actually started creating, you lost it because you didn't tag it, or it was
Um,
recorded long time ago?
Not really. I mean, one time, like, I'll use like some backup hard drives. I do have, like, and I'll archive stuff, but I've become pretty organized. I had several jobs, like after college, working in print shops and sign shops, a lot of those jobs required me to, like, they would have organization structures of
Hmm.
managing client files and folders, and so it kind of became second nature to just
Hmm.
organize where things go and where you put them, so yeah, I don't really think that's been a challenge. Although, and maybe that's because one hard lesson I had was I got hired at this print shop. It was like my first kind of design job after college, and I was just doing production design for a little print shop. And the way they were storing their files was kind of dumb. They had like this backup RAID drive, and they, like, we were working on files, and one of the guys on the team, like fat fingered a button and created like an alias folder for this huge client folder of just document all the stuff that we reproduced for a client. And I saw it, and I was working on their files, and I thought, like, gosh, I don't really want this alias folder to be sitting there, because that just seems like there could be a problem. So I deleted it, and then it deleted the main folder, and it just like wiped it out, and they didn't have like any redundancy on this RAID
Wow.
drive. And it was like, and the owner was up like all night trying to retrieve like 10 years worth of documents for this client. And I came in the next morning, and I wasn't the one that created the alias folder, but I was the one that deleted it. And so my time card was all totaled out and they were like, you're done. And I went, and I was kind of bummed, but at the same time, like, you try and like lessons like that. Like I kind of learned, well, okay, that's bad. You got to be careful with your documents and data. But also, like, I think I would just left and I was like, it was this little job at this little print shop, and I kind of was like, yeah, I mean, I'll find something better anyway. And it kind of pushed me to not get too attached to like a little like a job like that. And I think, and I've always had that ambition to be. I've been working independently for 7 years doing art and design for clients, and that was a long time coming of working like 10 years before that, wanting to not work at somebody else's company,
Hmm. Hmm.
So anyway, um, that was a hard lesson, but yeah, I'm pretty careful with my documents and try and keep things organized. And I kind of like categorizing and like I'm pretty organized mentally.
And does your research for your creations start after the work get commissioned, or you always have your eyes open and then whenever you see something inspiring, you record it somewhere?
I have a lot of curiosity, so I do read a lot about like just a lot of different topics and kind of intriguing things, and that comes into play overall, like researching like sacred geometries or like all different like spiritual teachings or whatever, like things that are just kind of fascinating. And so that comes into play, but I think a lot of the assignments I end up getting, there is like a direct illustration aspect to it. So it will be like, like here's I've done a lot of work like for conference rooms at tech companies. And so they'll like the people will have these themes for a floor and have all these names like around a theme, whether they're like, historic people or something related to, transformation or something. And so then I dig in and research and try and make an illustration that's kind of like relating to that word, but like thoughtfully kind of depicting the message they're trying to show through a theme. And so most of it comes like after
Hmm.
the the assignments kicked off, and
Okay.
trying to find imagery that fits it.
Okay. Okay, great. So the reason I have been asking these questions is because I make films, and for making films, I also watch a lot of films. And when I watch them, I might find something inspiring, but at that time, I may not be making any film. So the moment of inspiration hitting and the moment of actual creation can be separated by years sometimes. And what has happened with me is in the past, I used to lose the inspiration that I got when I actually started making the film. I wanted to retrieve the inspiration that I got like 2 years ago.
Totally.
So one thing that I started doing was just like started texting myself that this is the film that I watched and this is a really inspiring scene or whatnot. But then um, again, the tagging of that comes into play, right? Because you could keep texting and then I would have like this big inbox of all the texts from the past. I may not be able to find what I actually want to see.
Yeah.
So that's why I was asking, like, how do you organize your inspiration?
I think a part of that too, a really big part that I've learned is like not to get like, it's good to value your ideas, but it's good to realize like idea generation is kind of like it's like a flowing river, like and something that one day the way you were feeling and what you saw and that, and to write it down. But I think a lot of people make the mistake of getting like a little too in love and attached to a lot of ideas that like they felt really good about at the time, and realize that like a lot of that stuff just like you like there. And I was actually doing a practice, a lot of ideas you just got to let go and realize like maybe that day it was a really good moment for me, but this idea doesn't have a lot of legs. And so for a while there, I was writing down, just doing like a list of ideas,
Hmm.
like 10, 10 movie concepts,
Hmm.
or, 10 like ways to brush your teeth, and just to use those muscles in your brain of generating ideas, but then just like also tossing them, like
Yeah.
when I was in a more corporate environment, a lot of people, like I'm over there, people see me creating because it's like, oh, he's making this, he's making a sign, he made this art for the wall. And so people would come over and they're like, I have these ideas, and like, that's cool. But it's just like, I think we got to, like, a lot of people have a lot of ideas, and it's exciting to have ideas, but they're not all great ideas.
Yeah. 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 Correct.
And even if, I mean, a lot of things I'll go through the full process and make, and it's like everything's not a home run. Like sometimes it's just like, what, like, why did I go down this road so
Yeah.
far? And you got to let it go though.
Yeah.
So I think I do think that's hard. It's more than like, retrieval. It's just kind of returning back and going, maybe that wasn't as rad as I thought. You know?
Okay, so now let's move on to the creation part.
Okay.
So I will tell you the experience that I have for creating, and then you tell me if you kind of feel the same way or your process is a little bit different. So while making films, the way it happens for me is I pre-visualize the film by creating a storyboard.
Mhm.
And then while I'm creating the storyboard, which is like a building a prototype phase for my creation, the actual creation is actually getting built in my head, right? It's just not in front of my eyes. Then the next step is shaping a prototype. So when I get like video and audio data for the prototype that I had already built with storyboard, then the process comes of removal of information so that I can uncover the creation that I'm already seeing in my head. So do you go through similar process of pre-visualizing, get building it in your head first, and then doing something to uh, realize it in front of your eyes?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm totally impressed with film making. That's not really something I've explored, but just the whole thing of it, and like especially the like, we were just watching some. I have kids, so I watch all the Pixar's and all the
Hmm.
cartoons and everything, and I'm just like, man, so much artistry and just all the with and sound, and like there's so much to it. And then I'm like, gosh, like I just make like a few flat 2D images, like who cares about that, But anyway, but I think, and there was a time I was really, um, for quite a few years in my 20s, I really wanted to get into, like doing comic books.
Hmm.
And I kind of went down that road a long time. And I've always done like cartooning, so in that process, there's storyboarding and there's writing and
Yeah.
there's together a story. And I've laid out and kind of started to assemble a few different children's books. And so there's definitely that process of thumbnailing, or even like an image. Like I'll do a lot of small sketches to try and capture like a bigger gesture, and kind of get like what's the overall form of this image. Because
Right.
like when you're making one 2D image, like you need to, I think what sets apart, like, there has to be some quality that's harmonious and pleasing. Like even if it's a crazy looking like abstract like street art, there's a point where it looks like there's an understanding of visual harmony,
Hmm.
versus just like it doesn't look as well made, and so, I think getting some of the big gestures down, and then, yeah, and then sketching, like that's one thing that's pretty cool with the digital sketching now, is you can create layers. And sit there and draw and rework lines and erase.
Yeah.
You're not fighting paper and erasers, and you're just, you can have multiple layers. And then, it's kind of like, we used to do tracing on a light board, but now it's like your light board is just another layer
Correct.
in a file. And but there's definitely what you were saying of like the cutting away is definitely a huge part. And it's almost like the idea thing, right? Like you got to realize like what's left is what needs to be, and not to get too attached to certain layers, or with you like probably like certain clips of dialogue or certain scenes that, like, it's like save it for the reel at the end.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it's hard to let go. And but I think, and I think that too is like preserving things and not overworking things that are really interesting. Like I found out like sometimes you'll have like a really interesting area of an image or a painting, but then you get carried away and kind of go over it or muddy it up. And I think when something beautiful, like in the art, I pick up more on like beautiful tones or like gradients of paint or certain textures, and when they come in, it's like I don't want to lose that part, because that's really where magic's happening.
So, since you make wall pieces, your actual creations must be huge in size. So, in that scenario, how do you pre-visualize that? Like, do you take pictures of, let's say, these conference rooms and then sketch it on that picture? How do you
Or
pre-visualize your art?
yeah, for a lot of the bigger stuff, it's like going out and getting accurate measurements. And I'll do kind of like I kind of learn layouts from like how architects would do layouts, like doing 2D elevations, they're called.
Hmm.
And then having like a scale area, like this is my rectangle, and then working within that. And then if it's something where I'm going to be creating stencils or cutting elements that are going to be attached,
Hmm.
and then it's a matter of like keeping that all to scale. I like to do 1 inch to 1 foot scales, so
Hmm.
keep the math simple. And so yeah, that, and with that I'll do like scale layouts. And then yeah, for me personally, I like to have the art pretty well. Like this last year I've done some bigger pieces of my personal art, like bigger like 4 foot by 4 foot, like panel paintings and around that size. And I've really like the the art is already drawn, like a combination of going through that digital process we just talked about and doing a sketch and then working out the digital art and then going, okay, this is how I want the image to look, and then executing it large scale, so that when I get to that process and I'm working big, it's a little more production based. I'm not like guessing color schemes or the positioning of things, or like, not to say that when you go big, then you do have more room to add some extra elements, or to make certain areas of color have a more interesting texture or feel. But it's like little tweaks, as opposed to like trying to figure out a whole layout at a big scale.
But then, for the clients themselves, do you show them this pre-visualization at all? Like, this is how it's going to look, and then you make it?
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where like I've I've found success in that process with the client, because they're able to look at it and go, yeah, it looks great. And then what they get is pretty much exactly what I showed them.
And how do you make these pre-visualization images?
I'll use like Adobe software, so I'll use Illustrator, and then I do lay. I have like templates that I'll like in Adobe InDesign, so I just make a PDF, and usually looks pretty official and has some other little information on it around the project, and just send it. I mean, I think there's value in having that process be clean, like there's, especially when you're working with a big client, like you don't want to just be kind of handing them like scratch notes or
Right,
showing like rough sketches that are, I mean, artists do work differently, so I don't want to knock anybody's process, but I just like to have like these solid stats of like
right.
have it look like really professional all along the way.
But then, like for example, these conference rooms that you were talking about. So would you take a picture of this conference room, go to Illustrator, actually add your art on these conference room walls in that image, and then show that image to the client?
Sometimes I'll do that, and
Okay.
sometimes it'll just be like, here's a picture of the room, but I'll just show the 2D scale
Okay.
rendering of like the flat graphic, and
Ah,
won't necessarily like, because that's an extra step to go mock it up on the you know on the actual wall on the photo, and so a lot of times that's not necessary. Sometimes I do that though.
okay. Um, and then the communication with your client, do you use any particular technology for it, like any communication software, or is it through email and texting and like that?
Yeah, usually just email, texting, like pretty basic. That's like I said, I just tried to kind of stick with a lot of basic tools, not like forcing it, but it's like, yeah, I'm usually just email.
Okay. Um, then the actual creation part, is it paint or is it wooden thing that you use like a CNC router or something? Like what are the elements of your creation?
Yeah, I use all that. It depends on, is it indoor, is it outdoor, what is the client looking for? Like, there's kind of a variety, and with the experience that I've had, there's, I've done print production, I've done like, a lot of spray paint work over the last few years. Um, and so like it just kind of depends on the job, depends on what the client's looking for. And I have a pretty diverse portfolio now. Sometimes I'll reference or I'll recommend like a certain type of thing based on what that project
Hmm.
entails. But it's pretty diverse, and then that way like it gives me a lot of opportunity to kind of try different things. Like sometimes it'll just be an image, sometimes it'll be something made out of wood. Like there's pretty big variety I've done.
How do you undo stuff? Like if you have to undo, how do you undo it?
Command Z.
But that's digital, right? So if you go, how do you make sure that you don't have to undo your physical creations? Like once you create them, has it ever happened that okay, it's not
Well,
looking like you
I
you
used to worry about that more in the beginning, kind of like what if this client moves? What if they need to move all this stuff? But I kind of, not that it's explicit in my contracts, but it's like, hey, if you bought this art, it's like, if you went down to Ross and bought 10 frames and put them up, like you're not gonna call Ross and be like, hey, I'm done with these frames. It's like if you bought it, it's yours. Like I'm that, I left it at the door. And but I think like maybe, in terms of like mistakes, or when you're painting like a huge wall
yeah.
and the color isn't taking right, or so. I think, I mean, one of the big things I've learned is you have to creatively um do something to make it not look like a mistake. Like you have to kind of
Hmm.
get creative and solve a problem and make it look intentional, as opposed to like you did something wrong. It
Right.
doesn't, every like there's definitely some pieces that I've left and was like, that does not look how I wanted it to, but it does look done. And so, I've got to keep going. But
Yeah.
I think, yeah, you just have to learn how to really alter things, or and thankfully with what I'm doing, like it is art. And there are times when it's maybe not quite what the client expected. But usually I try to just eliminate all, those things. I think the big thing is it's got to stay on the wall
Yeah.
when you're installing stuff. I mean, I've gotten a lot of I've learned a lot about adhesives,
Nice.
attaching things in a way that they're not going to come off the wall.
So now let's move to the post creation aspect. So what I want to know is maybe let me be very specific. So do you use social media for marketing yourself, and how do you use it?
I do have Instagram, but I really hate social media, and I wouldn't really call myself a total introvert. I'm kind of half half according to the tests I've done on that subject. But I just don't really like social media. I think it's caused more problems than good. Like that's just my opinion, but there's some data to back me up. So I don't. I kind of quit Facebook a long time ago. I realized Instagram's owned by them, but that's kind of all I have. And I think in a way I do pay the price for it because I don't really have as much exposure or a
Hmm.
desire to kind of push myself out in the public eye as much as I should. So I think in my whole process, that's probably my weakest link is promotion and
Hmm.
that type of thing. And thankfully, like I have, worked a lot word of mouth directly with
Hmm.
some clients, which has allowed me to keep going. But the social media marketing thing is not really my cup of tea.
Is it because you hate publishing, like thinking about the post, when to post and all, or you just don't like creating the content for social media?
I mean, I think it's a combination of all that. Like,
Hmm.
um, you know, it it's definitely like philosophical. Part of it is, yeah, like what do you like I have time on my calendar that's supposed to be like digital marketing, but
Okay.
I don't really like know what to do or what, how to go. And I do what I can.
Yeah. So I started using social media recently, and what I have realized is I love creating the content. Like I love creating what to post. I just hate the posting part of it. Like I don't want to like think about hashtags, post text, when to post, which channel to post on. I
Right.
like creating the content. So if I could somehow separate the content creation from content publishing, that would help me a lot.
Totally. And there
Yeah.
are people out there that are good at that. And so I've been kind of talking about that a little more of like, that I have some friends who've been able to find people who that is their forte and can kind of get wind in their sails of
Yeah.
creating that audience and what to put, because it's a different process, like, and how
Right.
much how much do you want to put on your shoulders and own that you're going to try and be good at, like it's so that. And that's what really the last year I said I'm gonna focus on making some art that I really want to make as best as I can. I'm going to focus on, and promotion. That's what we're talking about. I did kind of double down this last year. We have a great community that's been building up here in Santa Cruz and in the Santa Cruz Mountains where I live, of people going out and doing these open air markets, and they've always
Hmm.
been going on. But I think the interest in them after COVID, after people have been home with a little more time to create things they want, or maybe they lost a job and have to pivot. And there's a lot of really cool people going out in the public and organizing events. And actually, Cheyenne, who introduced me
Yeah.
to you, she's been organizing a lot of great events. And so I've kind of upped the scale of my tent and my banner, and I made some walls for my. And so I've been, because that wasn't always really exciting to me too, but I think recently with the community of that, um it has been a little more exciting. And so I've put more energy than, not so much focusing on the online, but as the offline and in the real world. And so I've been enjoying doing that and going out in public and having people buy some physical prints and
Right.
physical art.
Great. Great. Last quick question. So what is your vision for your own creations? Like for example, by looking at the tools and technology that you see around you, do you see yourself creating in a different manner in future? It's a quick answer, quick question.
Well, for the last year, or for the last 3 years, I've been focused on tangrams, which is this ancient Chinese puzzle form, and I was doing a client project around it, and it just really intrigued me. And through that, through what I learned with laser technology, reproductions, the digital, I've been able to kind of take graphic design and like cartoon illustration that I've always loved and like fine art and spray paint and larger format techniques, and I've kind of combined them. And that's where over the last 3 years I made this really unique body of work that I'm really proud of, and that's what's up in a show right now called In the Seventh Year
Hmm, hmm.
at the Idea Fab Labs. And I think with what I'm doing with that body of work, I'm going to continue probably down that path for a while, because there's just I'm getting a lot out of it and I'm having a great time sharing it with other people.
Great. Hey, thanks a lot, Joe, for your time. It was great talking with you.
Thanks, Ashay. Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in. If you are a creator, I would love to talk with you. Please connect with me through my website or social media. See you in the next episode.